everyone, I hope you are doing great. Today we are going to have a kind of analytical feedback about Task 1 Academic Report. So if you are an IELTS candidate and if you are thinking of different kinds of strategies with the help of which you can enhance your understanding of scoring system, this is the best place to work on that. So today I've decided to share with you one of the reports that I've received from one of you so that you can have a better understanding of different kinds of stages based on which your score will be determined. So firstly, you're supposed to write 150 words for Task 1 Academic Report. If you fail to do so, it means, for example, if you write something like 140 words, you will be actually your score will be affected negatively because you have failed to achieve the very first part of the instruction, which is about the word count and word requirement. So try to write at least 150 words. Of course, you can go for a higher number, but something like 170 to 180 would be a great number of words. The other thing is about the instruction, because it always wants you to summarize the information. You should remember that you're not supposed to write about all the information or the data that is shown and given on the chart or charts. Instead, you should be looking for different kinds of similarities and differences or maybe exceptions to go for grouping, because we should compare the data in a very sophisticated and understanding way so that everyone who reads your report can understand it vividly. In other words, I usually tell my students to think that the examiner or the reader is not going to be given the visual illustration that you are provided with. So you should go for writing and designing the report in a way that is so clear and easy to follow. So that should be your aim. It means that you should go for changing and transforming the data, the figures, the numbers into words in a very clear and easy way. So this will determine your task response, which actually makes 1/4 of your score. Okay, so it is 25% of your score. The other item that we should be looking for is about the coherence and cohesion, because as I told you, you're supposed to go for comparison wherever it is relevant. And of course, you see different kinds of trends to work on, maybe similarities or differences or maybe different kinds of exceptions. So of course, there should be something that you can select in that regard. And there you go with the miracle of linking words and linking devices. You should be using different things like while, whereas, although, in contrast. Despite this, unlike that, and many other things that you should get familiar with, because doing so and using these kind of linking words, linking devices, will give the signal to the reader that here we go with a contrast, there we go with a similarity. You are going to read about an exception. So these are very nice signals and they will help you get a higher band score. Remember to use them efficiently. And the other point about these kind of linking devices, which will make your report much more coherent, is about using them in moderation, which means that you shouldn't be using them all the time, because even in our first language, we wouldn't do that. We usually use them in different kinds of circumstances which are needed. For example, if you are adding an idea, if you are showing a contrast, if you are talking about similarities and stuff like this. So overusing them will bring you nothing. And of course, not using them shows that you are not in a good place and you do not deserve a high band score. So moderation is the key. The next item that we should be talking about is referencing, because referencing is very important. We wouldn't repeat something because we are referring to that. When you say that these will bring you a lot of advantages, you are referring to the previously mentioned idea. And the reader can easily understand what exactly you are referring back to. There should be a lot of actually referencing in your work. So be aware of that, please. The next item that we should be talking about is vocabulary and lexical resource. So you should be looking for different kinds of words that show, an increase, a decrease, something like this. Because in academic reports, we are talking about these kind of, trends. So you should have a wide variety of vocabulary list in order to make that kind of variety that is needed for a high band score. The other thing is about the accuracy of those words, because sometimes it is clear that the students are just trying to use and implement them into their writing without thinking about their usage. So instead of forcing their use into your job, into your task, just try to be natural. Use them whenever you possibly can do. So let's move on and talk about the last item in this regard, which is about grammar and structure. Because you need to work on your knowledge of tenses. As far as sometimes you're talking about past, sometimes you're talking about present, or maybe there are some times that you're supposed to talk about future. And of course, on some specific circumstances, you've got a mixture, a combination of different kinds of tenses like past, present, and future, for which you have to be well prepared in order to be able to get a high band score. So what I'm saying is that work on your grammar, because it will affect your score and it will show the examiner how careful and how accurate you are at this. Okay, the other point is about the use of complex structure, because we need to see a combination of short and long sentences, simple, compound, and complex sentences, if you are determined to get a band 7 in this part. So let's move on and see what we have in this report to be mentioned and analyzed. There we go with the chart. Here you can see that the graph below shows average carbon dioxide emissions per person in the United Kingdom, Sweden, Italy, and Portugal between 1967 and 2007. So you can easily understand that we are talking about the past, okay? So every tense used need to be very carefully chosen because it is about past. The first part, as you see, is written like this. The given line graph provides information as to CO2 emissions per person in an average in 40 years. So CO2, the O has to be capitalized as well because it is an acronym and acronyms need to be capitalized. The next item that has to be corrected is about the preposition. You've got it to be on, okay? So on average, not in. So you see that here we have an introduction about what exactly we are going to read. Now I can understand that we are given a line graph and it is about the CO2, okay? So here we go with the next paragraph. From an overall perspective, it can be seen that per capita carbon emissions in the UK and in Sweden had a declining trend, while this amount for Portugal and Italy rose over the course of 40 years. There we go with an overview. In your academic report, there should be an overview which clarifies the fact that you are actually telling us about the gist, the whole story behind this visual illustration. So there we go with the overview. We usually use something like overall, okay, or from an overall perspective, something like that. The next part, in 1967, the amount of CO2 emissions. Here, you need to make sure that these two parts agree with each other. What I'm saying is that either go for the countable noun or uncountable noun because both of them are okay. So if you go for emissions with S, you need to have the word to agree with that, which is number. The next item is about emission without S. So amount would be okay. The agreement is very important between your subject and actually determiner. So the next problem of this person is exactly the repetition of what we have just talked about. So here we go with for the UK was 11 metric tons, which was about 11 times, a nice way of saying the number, than those produced in Portugal. In addition, he is trying to add something. Sweden produced 9 metric tons, which doubled the amount of CO2 emissions in Italy. From 1962 to 1972, the CO2, take a look, I'm just telling you about the repetition of the problem that we previously saw. So that is the point. Sometimes a problem will just be repeated because you didn't know about the problem. And as you can see, for example, this is just repeated here as well. And of course, now you've got the chance in order to distinguish and understand and detect the problems that you usually make, but you may not be aware of. So if you're interested in having those mistakes detected, you can consult your teacher or maybe just ask different kinds of agency which just do the correction for you. Or maybe if you're interested, you can submit one of your samples, that is of course your work, and I will check it out for you. So the CO2 emission for Italy and Portugal rose to 9, 7, and 2 metric tons in order. In contrast, so there we go with a kind of linking device that we talked about. Here I can see that we are going to talk about another side of the discussion, the opposite. The UK CO2 productions experienced a declining trend to 10.3 metric tons. So the next paragraph is, of course, about let's say, other parts that need to be discussed. So here we go. From 1977 to 2007, the UK CO2 emissions per capita still had a declining trend to 9 metric tons, still remaining the first country as to CO2 emissions. Great! The scenario for Sweden was the same. Remember to use the all the time before same, but it was in a sharp trend. Does it have a problem? No, not at all. But if you pay attention, the word trend is being repeated a lot. So that's why I'm just suggesting in order to have a wide variety of options here. For example, you can go for a downward, falling, a sharp decline, or whatever you're interested in having it replaced by. And declining trend. Declining again is repeated. So there we go with falling, decreasing, dropping, or whatever. To 6 metric tons. So very nice, relative clause. It touched the CO2 emissions for Portugal in 2007. Italy, like Portugal, had an increasing trend so that it overtook the mentioned amount for Sweden in 1987, reaching at 8 metric tons in 2007. Okay, what do you think about this person's score? What is your opinion about task response, about coherence and cohesion, of course about vocabulary, and finally about grammar? Which score do you think would be a good one or the appropriate one? I believe it is a 6.5 because you can see that I've got a 7 for the task response. The selection of idea is good. The presentation of the data explained here is perfect. We've got some, linking words like although, if I'm not mistaken. We've got in addition, in contrast, but the number of these kind of linking devices and references can be higher. So what I'm saying is that the author could have used a wide variety of linking devices because there are very different kinds of spots which were available in that respect. The next item is about vocabulary. So, oh, I think I forgot. I would give a 6 for the CC or coherence and cohesion. And for vocabulary or LR, lexical resource, I would give a 6 because, as I mentioned, some words like trend, like declining, are just repeated. So, as I was saying, it would be a good idea to allocate a 6 for the part which is related to LR, that is a lexical resource, because of the fact that this person has used a wide variety of options and vocabulary items. But there are some repeated words like declining, like trend, because if you are determined to get a 7 in this part, you should be using a wide variety of words and vocabulary, and there shouldn't be repetition. Okay, so that's why I'm just telling you to increase your knowledge about vocabulary, especially about these kind of words, which are very likely to appear and to be used and utilized in a wide variety of reports. So the last item would be grammar. This person is very good at grammar and the usage of tenses. So as you see, there are a lot of sentences, including complex, compound, and of course simple sentences. And most of these sentences are error-free. And that is the most important thing that you should be careful of in order to get a 7 in this respect. I would give a 7 for grammar and accuracy. So we've got 2 7s and 2 6, which equals 6.5 as the whole score. I would be so happy to have you on board, and as I mentioned previously, you can subscribe to this channel because it will be a very great motivation for me to continue producing and sharing with you this kind of content. So have a great day and love you guys. Bye bye.